Okay, here we go, chapter 11. Let's see what Winston's getting up to today. This chapter is called A Cosy Bed Made of Straw. Winston was on his way. He was feeling a jumble of excitement and nerves. He was excited because it seemed as if his task of delivering his letter to Father Christmas would be accomplished much quicker and with less travelling over an ocean than he thought. But he was also nervous because he was now in the busiest part of the city. All around him was noise and movement and flashing lights. Trams rattled down the centre of the wide road, and there were many lanes of honking, hooting and sputtering automobiles whizzing past. Far below his paws, Winston could feel the underground trains rumbling and grumbling. He weaved his way through the crowds of people on the pavement. Many of them looked like they were on their way to parties. Women in long gowns that sparkled in the headlights of the passing vehicles picked their way along the pavement on fancy high-heeled shoes. Winston had to be very careful of those. There were men in two-tone shiny shoes, and when Winston looked up at them, he saw they were all wearing smart suits with snazzy bow ties. As Winston made his way through these glamorous people, he stopped feeling nervous and started to feel very Christmassy. "I'll deliver the letter to Father Christmas," he squeaked to himself. "Then I'll find somewhere snuggly to spend the night and have a good sleep. I'll need it after all this adventuring." Suddenly he heard something unusual. It was music, but not like the loud jazzy music that had been floating out of the restaurants and clubs he'd been scurrying past. This was gentle, like a lullaby. Winston stopped to listen for a moment, his ears waggling like antennae, trying to find out where it was coming from. He followed the sound and found it was coming from an old building with a tall pointy tower that was set slightly back off the main road. A soft, warm, flickering light was coming from within, and Winston sneaked in through a gap in the door. The inside of the building was beautiful, and Winston was transfixed by the carved ceiling and colourful stained glass windows. Hundreds of candles flickered softly, making the whole place feel very peaceful. He wasn't alone. The building was full of people sitting on long benches, listening quietly to a choir at the front singing beautiful music. Winston knew some of the words, because he'd heard them being played on the radio and by bands in the city. Christmas carols, he thought. As he looked around, he spotted a curious object set up nearby. It was a large toy building, a bit like a doll's house, but it looked more like a barn or a stable. Inside, several statues were standing on a bed of clean, sweet-smelling straw. There was a woman in blue and several men. Some were dressed in fancy clothes, and others were dressed like farmers, and there were even some pretend sheep standing beside them. Everyone was looking at a tiny wooden box in the middle. It was filled with straw, and inside, fast asleep, was a tiny model baby. "That does look like a nice place to sleep," Winston thought, and he yawned. Perhaps it wouldn't hurt if he just had the tiniest of naps there beside the baby. But as he began clambering into the stable scene, the choir finished singing and the congregation clapped. The sudden noise made Winston stop sharply in his tracks. He waggled his whiskers. "Winston," he said sternly to himself, "fancy thinking about having a nap when you haven't finished your important job." And with a flick of his towel, he forced himself to pad back down the aisle and out into the cold night. He thought about the little baby asleep in the wooden box full of straw and promised himself that, as it was Christmas Eve, he would come back when the letter was delivered and have a nap in that nice, peaceful building while candles flickered warmly around him. And there's the scene where Winston wants to sleep. Okay?